The adventure game has been out of vogue for quite some time. While several excellent point-and-click adventure titles have been released during the new millennium, nothing has really broken into the mainstream. Telltale Games has been steadily releasing adventure titles with modest followings. Their newest title, The Walking Dead, capitalizes on the popularity of both Robert Kirkman's comics, which the game is actually based on, and the TV series. Telltale's previous attempts at basing games off of popular media franchises hasn't exactly set the world on fire. But since we're in the midst of a zombie zeitgeist, The Walking Dead is poised to bring the adventure game back into the public eye and possibly raise it from the dead. The Walking Dead fits into the comic canon and features cameos from popular characters, but its real focus is on original characters. You take control of Lee Everett, a college professor who has been convicted of a serious crime, and begins the game in the back of a cop car. The car swerves off the road when the officer at the wheel nearly hits someone. Lee finds himself cuffed and in a ditch where he first encounters the undead. After escaping from his cuffs and surviving a near-fatal encounter with a walker, Lee stumbles into the home of Clementine, an 8-year-old girl whose parents left for Savannah prior to the onset of the zombie epidemic. Her innocence juxtaposes Lee's dark past, and she is in many respects a source of redemption as Lee takes it upon himself to protect her and help reunite her with her family. Along the way, the duo runs into a colorful cast of characters that join them in the quest for survival. The relationship between Lee and Clementine carries the experience. Clementine herself is very likable, and despite her age, she never comes off as too needy or whiny. Lee himself comes off as sympathetic, and cultivating his relationship with Clementine is an emotional investment rarely found in games.
We did. Why can't they?
We're a lot smarter than they are. They're just like dumb animals. They can't open doors.
He used to have a pet hamster. One night, he figured out how to open the door to his cage. And when we woke up, he'd eaten half a box of cookies.
I don't think this is quite the same, Clem.
Yeah, right. This time we're the cookies.
Where The Walking Dead's tale succeeds is in its focus on the dark side of humanity rather than the danger of undead flesh-eating cannibals. At times, it can be brutal and gut-wrenching. There are conflicts within your party, conflicts with bandits, and clashes with other survivors. These situations are more compelling than facing off with walkers, and offer an appreciable degree of moral ambiguity, generally culminating in brutally nihilistic resolutions. This moral ambiguity is important since most of the gameplay in The Walking Dead centers around managing your relationships with those in your party. Members of your group almost always have dissenting opinions, and it breeds conflict. During conversations, you can choose how to respond, and unlike other titles that allow you to voice the protagonists and make choices, The Walking Dead features a timer to prevent you from analyzing your decisions. It keeps the tension up and the conversations flowing naturally. Who you side with and what you say determines how close you are to each person and can ultimately affect how they react in future scenarios. If a character feels you have their best interests in mind, they will back you, and those who oppose you may become hostile toward Lee. Well, this sounds great on paper. In practice, it's not as exciting as it seems. The problem is that in spite of giving you a lot of decisions to make, The Walking Dead doesn't change much in terms of its narrative arc. Some scenarios ask you to make a choice to save one character, causing the other to perish. These two characters generally serve the same role in the plot, and there isn't a compelling reason to see both scenarios play out since you won't see any noteworthy additions to the experience. You see the same locations and partake in the same scenarios and puzzles. You, as the player, have little overall influence in the narrative, and the experience is cheapened by attempting to take another approach on a second playthrough since it becomes apparent very quickly how inflexible the game is. With its episodic release schedule, it's wholly understandable that The Walking Dead doesn't feature a massive branching narrative, but it would have been nice if the path you take to the conclusion of each episode could vary. As it stands, there isn't much replayability in The Walking Dead. Puzzles and gameplay in The Walking Dead are rudimentary. Some sequences have you aiming a weapon to take down a few walkers, QuickTime events are sprinkled throughout the game's 5 episodes and DLC, and there are only a few puzzles. While The Walking Dead gleefully avoids obtuse puzzles that characterize many point-and-click games, its simplicity can be off-putting to veteran gamers. Puzzles have very apparent solutions, and often the only objects you can pick up are the ones you use to solve a puzzle. Having a few red herrings or multiple solutions to a scenario might have made these sequences more rewarding. Recently, Telltale also released a new Walking Dead DLC titled 400 Days, and it bridges the gap between the first and second season of the game. It opens with 5 vignettes that center around a diner that you can play through in any order you desire, and closes with an epilogue that ties these sequences together and teases what is to come. These vignettes provide a backstory for the 5 new characters and generally distill The Walking Dead to its most pure and compelling elements. Each sequence involves drastically different characters from different walks of life being forced to make nightmarish choices. These choices are generally as grim and gory as anything in the 5 primary episodes, and in some sequences there's an appreciable amount of suspense and tension. The whole experience will take you around an hour and a half to see through at the most, while the other episodes generally take more than 2 hours to complete. The epilogue also ends on a rather lukewarm note, but it does ramp up the anticipation for Telltale's follow-up season. Taking inspiration from its source material, The Walking Dead features a cel-shaded look that turns rather modest tech into something very pleasing on an aesthetic level. Characters emote with a slight cartoonish level of exaggeration that does a commendable job of selling each character's performance. The voice acting itself is strong and really brings the relationship between Lee and Clementine to life. Orchestral sounds also interject the drama to intensify the proceedings. The overall presentation does suffer from some awkward scene transitions and some really ugly textures, particularly on some of the zombies. These flaws are noticeable, but do little to detract from the experience. While The Walking Dead has its fair share of flaws, it may very well be the game that helps shine a light back on the point-and-click adventure genre. The way in which it capitalizes on human drama and making revolting and stomach-churning choices demonstrates why there's still a place for adventure games. It's unfortunate that the illusion of choice in Telltale's blockbuster is so paper-thin. Gamers who replay The Walking Dead from the start will find themselves with the same experience featuring different faces fulfilling the same duties as their counterparts. The lack of any kind of challenging or clever puzzles is disappointing since it makes the primary mode of gameplay simply making dialogue choices. Despite falling a bit short as a game, The Walking Dead is a tour de force experience, a sanguinary saga that's worth partaking in for gamers and non-gamers alike.